Hello, my lovely ghouls and curious mortal minds. My name is Akarian Ashes, and I did something that I haven't done in a long time. Touch grass. But
Or
more
more
specifically,
specifically,
go to school. I decided to go to college just to see what it was like, and I gotta admit, I was disappointed by the lack of people breaking out into song, but I digress.
I took two classes, and one of them turned out to be a big mistake on my end, criminal justice, and the other was a drawing class. I kind of had no idea what I was getting into with the drawing class, I just knew that I wanted to take one. It wasn't anything specific like character design or color theory, it was just drawing. Super vague, I know. The syllabus wasn't much better either, honestly, but nonetheless, I took it because I wanted to improve my art and see what it was all about. So without further ado, let me get into what I learned in the past 3-ish months in the fall. Even though it is spring now, but you know. On the first day of class, we had an assignment where we were given a potato and were told to carry it with us for 3 days constantly, even watching TV with it or doing other things together. It was quite humorous. Then, we had to draw it from memory next time we went into class. We all thought we did a pretty good job at first, but then we had to draw another version of it where we actually referenced it from in front of us. And I gotta say, it looked completely different from what we remembered them to be. It was fascinating because my brain made up details and artifacts that weren't actually there on the potato, filling in certain bumps and curves to make it more what my memory served than actual fact. It was more a fascinating psychological experiment than an actual art thing, but it was still good still life practice. Contour drawing. Honestly, I suggest going into this just because it's an interesting experiment and also really helps with drawing, in my opinion. Essentially, without looking at the page, draw an object in one line and you have to go extremely slow to the point where it's incredibly boring. It's not really about the details, but rather the broad shapes, movement, and expression of the piece or object itself. For my class, I had multiple objects placed in front of me, though often quite far away so I couldn't see the details, and essentially I had to try and mimic the basic shape and silhouette of it in one long arduous stroke. There is a thing such as blind contour drawing, which essentially you're not looking at the page, like you intentionally do not look at the page, and you just try to draw, like just do contour drawing, but it's blind because you're just looking at the object itself and just kind of guessing with like muscle memory where everything is. It's gonna look like complete shit, by the way, if you do this, and that's kind of the point of it, but at the same time it is a skill in itself. I've seen people blind contour draw and they do amazing work, so it's not an impossible thing to do. Also, like, blind people draw, like, so, but it's a contour drawing specifically where you have to do it in one long stroke. For me, contour drawing is pretty tiring for the mind, and I think that most of my classmates also agreed with me on that. Even our professor pointed it out. As artists, especially in modern day with technology and everything, we're so used to quantity over quality, and this fear that you don't get to make something fast enough or you'll just be forgotten in the algorithm. In a way, it taught me that art isn't about if the world sees it, even if part of me, as most any artist, craves a certain kind of validation for their hard effort that goes into honing their craft. Remembering that was a big part of helping me slow down my process and just enjoy it, no matter how sloppy or messy the final product was. Basically, don't beat yourself up just because it looks like shit, because even the greats are not true masters of art because there simply is no such thing. There will always be something new to learn about art. Plus, it's more of a practice to loosen up rather than its own style, some of the time. Me when I contradict myself. For gesture drawings, it kind of paired up with the negative space drawings that I did because there's a certain level of simplistic silhouette with negative space like there is with gesture drawing, but there are many video tutorials out there of gesture drawing here on YouTube. Mostly we had a time limit and we had to cram as much of the fluidity and shapes as possible into the pages. It was a bit stressful, but it was great for getting a broad general shape before focusing on the details. However, it was a stark contrast to the utter slow pace of contour drawing, though. For the gesture drawing homework I was given, I drew hands in different ways and forms because 1, I need to get better at drawing hands, and 2, I had 5 minutes before class and I just did this in my car. You bet your ass I put on Spoken For and speed ran that shit because that was stressful as hell. I was like 2 seconds away from a mental breakdown. I was already at my limit and it wasn't even halfway through November yet. Like, be so for real. For negative space drawings, I did quite a few of these and I actually really liked them, but they kind of took a while. So for this one, I'm going to give you a bit of homework. Do a couple of pieces where you always have at least one object leaving the page, and you have at least one of the several objects that you put in the collage overlapping each other or stacked in an interesting way that draws the eye. Once you have them sketched out, outline them with a Sharpie and then fill in the negative space, with the exception of a white frame that you will measure around the perimeter of the page. Though I will note, some of the negative space drawings do well without any interior lines, and some do well with them. I think a lot of it is just personal choice, but also it's just good to do both, honestly. I only did one way and not the other, and also you can play with like what things you would like silhouetted, which things you wouldn't, like if you want the background white and the frame black and the objects black, or kind of how I did it where I had the white frame and black background with white, to just kind of pop the object, make the object pop sort of thing. But I kind of wish I did it the opposite way too, just to get a feel for it with interior and not interior lines. These negative space drawings help me figure out new and better ways of composition that I have not been used to, as well as it helped with harsh values and focal points in my mind of how to convey certain feelings and where to draw the eye. For example, an anxious piece might veer off the page in multiple places, drawing the viewer's gaze to dart all around rather than the main area. Or too many objects in one area might also make the eye avert to a more calm blank space. I think a balance of these two is what makes a more calm setting, if that's what you're going for. Also, don't quote me on that. This is just kind of what I got, but my professor kind of explained it a little awkwardly, if that makes sense. Like for me personally, I might have one or two small objects veering off the page, while the rest is decently composed. I'm just kind of repeating what my professor said, so don't come at me if I'm wrong. A lot of my negative space art pieces were actually themed around Hannibal or a general vibe of something similar, like, crime scene photos or, stuff like that, and just stuff that I collected from things around my room. Also, if you did the Apple trend that was happening a few months ago, it's kind of like that, but with a harsh black and white, rather than a grayscale or colored. Did you ever watch Looney Tunes as a kid, or am I just old? Either way, there's a scene where Bugs Bunny is painting and he holds up a pencil and looks at his subject before drawing. I thought it was funny and never actually understood that it wasn't a joke as a kid. What he did is a term called sighting. Sighting is essentially a technique where you take a pencil or something thin and long that you can hold in your hand. Take your pencil in your hand like this and then hold your arm straight out. Focus on the object, let's say it's a bottle. And let's also say that you're far enough away from the cap that it fits the size of the eraser. Draw the cap real quick. Now, how much of the bottle do you think the cap consists of? Or rather, how many of those caps do you think you would have to stack in order to get the full bottle size? Going with 7 for this bottle specifically, you basically estimate the height and width of your observation with the tip of your pencil to the bottle. Like I said, it's confusing, I know. However, I do have an alternative version to this if that didn't make any sense. Though it kind of coincides with the previous explanation in a way. I like to think of it as a game, or maybe even a reverse version of Akinator. Like, look at this object. Is it taller or wider overall? Taller, right? So with your pencil, you'll take the tip and measure how wide it is. And then you flip it right side up and compare it to the height. From this, we can measure the width is only 1/3 of the bottle's height. And also with this, we will draw a rectangle to give a general silhouette of the shape before drawing the estimated bottle size that we're scaling to our paper or canvas. It takes a while to understand at first, especially if you're mathematically inept like me, but once you get the hang of it, it's easy. When it comes to object relations, I'm not really sure how to add on to this, but basically do what I just said before, but more objects in boxes. Yeah. This is part of the scaling process to make sure that the bottle isn't the exact same size as the Eiffel Tower, unless if you're going for a crazy fucking perspective. Basically, just draw different objects on the same page and scale them appropriately. That's all that is. Thumbnail sketches are really important, and this is the main thing that we talked about, and since taking this class, I realized how important this is. To put it in a nutshell, because it's pretty easy to understand, basically draw 3 different angles or compositions for your art piece. You might draw one angle and think, it's good enough. But once you do 2 or more and compare them with basic shading, you might find that a different one actually is perfect and matches the feeling or look you're going for. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about thumbnail sketches though. It's pretty easy of a concept to understand, and honestly, I think that ever since that class, I've actually put that into a lot of my work, and it's helped so much.
Ком Тансен.
Ich will nicht.
Ком Trinken.
Ich will nicht.
Okay, so this is where things get interesting. Well, more frustrating than anything, honestly, but still interesting. We had no idea what we were walking into this day. But it threw us all into a tizzy, because imagine walking into your class only to be told, okay class, today we're drawing upside down. At that point, I think we all died inside after hearing that, because that was so fucking intimidating. I mean, our muscle memory is used to drawing things how we see them in our day-to-day basis, and that was the point. Breaking down objects and subjects into basic shapes with that sort of logical detachment was the whole point of this week's lesson, at least for most of the part. So we were given a portrait of a woman drawn by Albrecht Dürer, but upside down. Also, it's his mom. But I say a woman, but it's literally his mom. It was incredibly difficult to jump into, especially without any warm-up whatsoever. On top of that, we had to apply cross-hatching as our shading instead of regular shading for most of the part. If you are unaware, cross-hatching is basically what they print out on a lot of money bills around the world as a very basic example. After that, we had to draw another one of Dürer's artworks of the rhinoceros that he did. I did better on this one now that I was starting to understand and get the hang of this lesson, but I also had to do it in an hour, so it was super rushed and sloppy unfortunately, but I got the general gist. So this is kind of hard to explain, but there are a lot of YouTube videos surrounding this, and that is 2-point perspective, or perspective in general, which is especially difficult. But once you get past the learning curve, it becomes a lot easier, especially with practice. As in 1-point perspective though, I never really learned that, so obviously, I'm not really going to go into either one. That was just something that I learned. Definitely look into both of those, because I actually might look into 1-point perspective after this and just do a little bit more of 2-point perspective, because I only had like a week for each of these lessons and I didn't really get too into it. Like I started to understand and it became like really easy for me, and then once the lesson was over, I kind of forgot a lot of it. Especially because it is so incredibly useful and vital in art.
In '87, Huey released this, 4, the most accomplished album. I think they're undisputed masterpieces. Hip to be square. Song's so catchy. Most people probably don't listen to the lyrics, but they should. Because it's not just about the pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends, but it's also a personal statement about the band itself.
Basically, this was a drawing study where we took everything that we had learned thus far and applied it to marble statue busts. This includes experimenting with shading techniques, values, anatomy, and focal points. I mostly do portraits, and I'm very comfortable with facial anatomy, though, of course, there is always room for improvement. So, in my brain, there's not really much to say about this, honestly, but I'm sure I'm missing a bit. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer.
You pick up your palette knife and then work that into your meat. Give your meat a good old rub. That's it. Nice and hot. Hot and spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
For my final, I took a whole bunch of pictures of myself for a Friday night's fit before attending a monthly drag show and drawing myself the next day. I wanted to make sure that my attire was at least halfway decent, that would have good values and not just a plain t-shirt and shorts like I usually wear at home. The coat took quite a while to fill in since it was the darkest value of my piece, along with my roots being the second darkest. Also, for values, if you are a traditional artist, please buy this ebony pen. Oh my god, or like a fucking, not ebony pen, but a graphite stick. Oh my goodness. This is my magnum opus. This is my Holy Roman Empire. Please. It is literally so good. I have not known fucking power like this. What is this fucking witchcraft, bro? It is actually crazy. I will forever glaze it. Like, please. Anyways, now that I'm done begging on my hands and knees, let me continue to tips and tricks. Tip number 1. Remember to think actively about creative decisions. Tip 2. Take a small art crash course on 2D design organization, especially about identifying and demonstrating the use of 2D organizational principles, including unity, tension, rhythm, balance, focal points, and emphasis. There are a few artists here on YouTube and other places that talk about this, and I'll link them down below. Khan Academy is also a wonderful place to learn about art history and art terms like that. If working on a traditional picture or piece feels something off with the face or composition, put your page up to a wall and turn your back to it before looking into the mirror. This is like a reverse tool in terms of traditional art. There are also filters on Snapchat, TikTok, and probably Instagram where you can invert whatever you point the camera at, but I kind of like the former version since social media distracts me like a moth to a flame. I really wish that I had written all of this down right after the classes so everything was still fresh in my head. However, I was lazy and I still had a lot of other assignments to do, as well as a lot of IRL drama that happened. I feel like a lot of what I explained was a bit vague because my memory is fuzzy. I have the muscle memory of what I learned, but it's more of an unconscious thing now than anything else. Plus, I needed to remember it so I could work on architecture for my comics since I suck at backgrounds and buildings. Anyways, all things considered, this class actually helped me a lot. I highly recommend touching on one of the topics listed for several days, maybe even a full week, just to get the skills cemented into your mind. At the end of the day, my biggest takeaway was the importance of artistic values, active thinking in the creative space, and intention behind each piece. Also, please do this traditionally. Please do this traditionally. Digital art is great and all, but I've realized that it's much harder to learn from mistakes when working digitally, because you can just clip and adjust your piece rather than erasing and getting that muscle memory going. Well, that's all for today, my lovely souls. I just wanted to add that I've been caught up in doing art shorts for so long that I haven't had the energy or motivation to post a normal video until now, since I'm kind of going through a bit of art burnout, unfortunately, though it's not because of this class. Also, this video is literally months late. I took this class from October to December, and it's currently April. Anyways, I might make a video on how to work through art block and burnout soon because my channel is starting to feel kind of like a ghost town more and more each day that I'm away. With that note out of the way, remember to drink some water, grab a snack, and make sure to take care of yourself. Okay, bye.